Let's have our weekly look into the future with award-winning futurist researcher, keynote speaker Nikolas Badminton on Canada Now. And Nick, you were at the Collision Conference last week. My first question, what is the Collision Conference?
I don't know. It was about 25,000 people just down at the Enercare Center.
Okay. So 25,000 people know what it is.
Yeah, 25,000 people. You know, a lot of buzz, a lot of great speakers.
Yeah.
Lots of people from Toronto, York region, and whatever, showing innovation, whatever. Lots of startups, lots of well-known speakers. Seth Rogen.
Oh, was Seth Rogen there?
Justin Trudeau.
Well, the Prime Minister was there. He was there on the very first night, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So were you there for that?
Yeah. I was there.
Yeah.
I was there. It was busy. Yeah. You know, it's, you know, when you see these people speak, some people just say what they say, and politicians, you know, do it in a political way that's fairly safe. And,
yeah.
You know, trying to be visionary, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of edge there. There's a lot of people really pushing the boundaries. A lot of sort of very surprising things.
Well, that's good. Now, one thing that we do need to touch on is Sidewalk Labs CEO Dan Doctoroff. He spoke about his plans for Toronto's smart city, specifically a new urban tech environment at Toronto's waterfront neighborhood, which is great because there's really nothing happening there.
That's right.
Yeah. So but that's by design, right?
Yeah, you know, they've been in this plan 18 months, 2 years, probably a little longer than that actually. Just putting it together, and when that project was announced, you know, it was announced with federal support from Justin Trudeau again, you know, and the city of Toronto and whatever. It's like, oh, we're gonna regenerate this area. It's gonna be fantastic, and you know, we brought together all of these great advisors from Canada, and you know, people from Sidewalk Labs, which is an Alphabet, you know, Google company.
Yeah.
And we're going to build the city of the future.
Yeah.
And slowly but surely, lots of discussion around data and privacy and who owns the citizen and tax breaks and who's going to make money and how they're going to make money have sort of clouded the whole sort of vision. And Dan Doctoroff came in and you know, revealed a whole bunch of things that are going to be coming up in the next month and in the next couple of years in terms of this building out. And it was pretty surprising, actually.
Well, now on notes of like transparency and you know, in data and privacy, like, were you satisfied with what he had to say?
Do you know what? He's a very charismatic guy, ex-assistant mayor of New York. I've always liked hearing him speak and his writing. I've always appreciated what Sidewalk Labs do, but also look at it from a critical perspective as well. Yeah. So, you know, he was sat down and he was talking very much, you know, June, so in a couple of weeks, there's going to be a plan dropped that should address all of the privacy concerns with big ideas about how that can be managed and, you know, and how they're going to develop it, what technologies they're going to deploy, what construction materials they're going to use, timelines. And he dropped a few interesting pieces of information we need to consider.
Can you do you have a good idea of what to expect next month out of them?
Yeah, so it was a Q&A with him, and really the first one was about data and privacy and what happens in an urban center when you don't sign a terms and conditions when you walk into a store or a mall or you walk down King Street, right?
Right.
So by the very nature of you being in a location, you consent to being part of the location, whatever that is, with the systems and if there's surveillance, facial recognition, or whatever.
Okay.
And he's sort of suggesting that there's urban data management via a government-sanctioned process. He didn't really go into details.
So basically the government is saying it's okay?
Yeah, so what I think is going to happen is Sidewalk Labs are going to say, this is how we think it should work. You know, yes, you're going to have access to the data. Certainly we hope that we're going to have access to the data. And it's going to be blessed from like the Toronto and maybe even the federal government, well, Toronto, Ontario, federal government. Yeah. And it's like a government-sanctioned process hides a whole world of legalese and other terms and conditions, which means that, yeah, you know, the Canadian government says it's okay. We're just still going to collect all the data. That's still, you know, part of what we build as the product of the city. And by the way, you as a citizen or a person that works there, you're part of the product and we own that.
So that, at least to start, that's going to be the case for one dedicated part of the city. If all goes well there, then I'm thinking every other city is going to want to do something like that with parts of their city, and then it's going to get to a point where I would think that that's how cities are going to be.
Yeah, so Portland's just starting a proof of concept with them as well. And he really said, he says, if we do this well, if this works, we're going to roll it out. Toronto's going to be there first. We can go bigger, further, and wider. That technology stack or whatever can go all the way across Toronto, into Ottawa, like Calgary, Vancouver, wherever in Canada, and then obviously all around the world. But, we got to be careful with this as well. We have to realize that cities are about people. And we don't just build a technology, or we don't just build a city, put people in, and it becomes this vibrant community. We need something organic. I was just in Songdo, South Korea, about 5-6 weeks ago, and it's a smart city. So big tech partner came in, I think it was Cisco. They laid all the, the data pipes, all the technologies. They put up buildings. They put a park in the middle of everywhere and whatever.
Yeah.
And it feels soulless. It's not human-centered design.
Really?
Yeah. And it's like, no one was in the park and no one was cycling around.
Well, is that because everyone's onto that and said, I'm not going there?
Well, no. It's just that they've become part of the algorithm. This is what we have to be careful of in the modern world. Anything from like applications, platforms, email even, whatever that we use, we have to be careful that we remain distinct from the algorithm, that we are still humans in the machine,
So do you feel that there is a danger that Toronto, because Toronto feels like Canada's guinea pig as far as smart cities are concerned, do you fear that that Toronto might fall under that trap with this?
Well, I think this is what's happening. They're calling it a smart city. What I think is actually happening is, and this is what Dan Doctoroff said, he goes, we're going to move our Toronto Google HQ down there. Okay. Then I start to think, it's like, okay, so Google employees are going to buy all of the accommodations. It ends up being a Google campus sponsored by the city with X amount of tax breaks. And I'm like, okay, this is really interesting. It's like, actually, are these cities just campuses? And what I think is really interesting is some of these large tech companies will be buying, many hundreds of thousands of hectares of land outside of larger cities, and they're going to build their own cities.
So that's what the trend that we're going to see is big tech going out and buying these big giant plots of land.
Yeah, and so Bill Gates a couple of years ago bought a huge amount of land outside Phoenix, Arizona. What would you do with that? You build your own version of what you think a city should be like. Right.
So these aren't going to be like theme parks or something.
No.
This is just going to be like, this is an area of the city that is owned by so-and-so.
Yeah.
This is what you're literally walking into.
Yeah. If you go to Seattle and you go to South Lake Union, I worked there quite a few years ago, probably about 11 years ago. It was not much going on. It's all Amazon now. Well,
see, that's what I think is Toronto waterfront. I think that's what the future of Toronto waterfront, it sounds like, based on what you're saying, is going to be.
Yeah, the dialogue that I was hearing from Dan Doctoroff is like, affordability, new materials, it's all going to be wooden, 20% cheaper, blah, blah, blah. In the same breath, he was saying that they're going to generate revenues from construction, real estate, and new products and services.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, they're not building a city for everyone. And that's the problem that I have with this.
So let's say they build it up to their satisfaction.
Yeah.
I decide I'm going over to the Toronto waterfront. What am I walking into? What's my experience going to be like?
I think the experience is going to feel like a beautiful place, and you're going to feel well served, and the services are going to match exactly what you want.
It sounds terrible. All of that sounds terrible.
To your preferences. I mean, the new world could be incredible.
Yeah.
But it could also be a place where suddenly, people recognize you and whatever, and the services are great. But that's because they're doing facial recognition. That's your pass card to the city.
So, things will happen like I walk by a billboard and I've got a beard, so they're going to be showing an ad for Just for Men for coloring my beard.
It's exactly what's going to happen. Exactly what's going to happen.
And maybe I want to see an ad that isn't. I honestly, I walk by an ad, hey, here's an ad for rhinoplasty. Yeah. You know what? I know I got a bigger nose. You don't need to be reminding me for every bus ad that I walk by. Is that going to be the situation?
This is what's going to be really creepy to you, is that they've actually done studies that you actually have a lot of brand recognition in your peripheral vision. You don't actually need to look at an ad. The fact that you'll actually understand that you're being communicated to in a targeted way through advertising, when you actually go to look at the ad, it's not what you were looking at originally. So you've got double the amount of advertising that's going to hit you, and it's just going to be this subconscious soaking up of the message.
So it's just going to feel like pop-up ads It's going to be like going on the internet.
Yeah, but you know, I always say this. You know, we talk about augmented virtual reality. It's like go to Times Square, go to Piccadilly Circus in London. Mm-hmm. It's already like that.
Well, but is it tailored to one's specific wants and needs according to whoever's putting in the data?
Not in those places. This is what's going to be fascinating.
Right.
But imagine that Sidewalk Labs builds a city that doesn't have advertising because it doesn't need to. The products and services, how people talk to you, and the whole experience just basically aligns you towards a set of products, a set of lifestyles, and you actually feel that you need to buy a number of things when you're in there anyway, and you don't know why you're buying them.
Ooh. Oh.
That's the secret. When the internet becomes invisible and you
Yeah.
don't see it, but it still has a huge influence on who you are and what you're
Right.
doing, that's the goal.
Okay. I'm just trying to wrap my head
Yeah,
around that.
yeah.
So, but how are they hooking me in without me knowing it?
So we have experiences in cities. A well-designed cities have got elements of play and stimulus. So it could be art on the walls of graffiti. It could be elements within the cityscape where you can play. It could be applications that really bind you all together. Mm-hmm. But hidden within those systems could be, you know, certain messages around, you know, eating more healthily, and then suddenly as you walk around the corner there's a health food store, and
Right.
as you walk in it knows who you are, and suddenly you've got, oh, you know,
Man.
this bowl, this quinoa bowl is Jeff Sammut's quinoa bowl.
Yeah. They literally saw you coming.
Exactly. That's exactly how it is, right? This is the utopian world for the tech companies. It's a slightly dystopian world for everyone else, unless you're sort of part of the program. Mm-hmm. I think that what I would love to see is an open data platform. The government owns that data. Ultimately, we as the individuals that go and use it own that data. It doesn't become a Google HQ. It doesn't become their campus. It actually becomes somewhere that's vibrant for the city and accessible to all. Mm-hmm. Or it ends up being, it's like a private golf course on the water. You know, only the people that are members can go in and play.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, see, with the data and who has their hands on it, it's not a comforting thing for me to know, well, the government's overseeing this. That's not comforting to me.
Now, I'm going to counter that. So I've worked a lot in the privacy and security business, and the commissioners around information privacy and security. And I can absolutely tell you that the Canadian system and the people in charge of privacy and security in Canada are some of the best in the world. Over the top, you've got government and whatever with their agenda.
Okay.
But the people that are putting together the policy and regulations really are excellent.
See, now that I'm glad to hear that, because I'm thinking if the government has their hands all over this, and I'm going into, let's say it's a couple years from now or whatever it is, and I'm walking into the Toronto waterfront to this smart city here within Toronto, and Doug Ford is still our premier, I'm going to be hit with Doug Ford ads everywhere I go.
Do you think he's that smart?
No. I don't think he's that smart, but I think someone might be in his ear that is that smart.
I don't know, maybe.
That's what I'm afraid of. Like, and same thing with like Trump.
I mean,
or whoever.
We're actually walking into a whole new discussion, right? Which is the use of platforms for political influence as well. I'd actually like to see that taken out of those situations as well.
Hells yeah. But I don't. Do you see that happening? If the government has their fingerprints all over this, like who are the good people that are, I mean, maybe you mentioned them in those that are overseeing all this. Who are the good people that are involved in this?
Okay, let's say this. Jeff's homemade hand soap versus me, a political figure. Mm-hmm. You've got $1,000 that you can spend on that week's advertising in that infrastructure, and I've got 10,000. They're just going to say, okay, no, it's $10,000 wins. Unfortunately, in the world today and in the old world and in this new world, money's going to win.
Sure.
And people are still going to buy their way into the influence.
Sure.
And that's what's kind of screwed up.
Well, yeah, it is. And I mean, who in part of big business, who's not going to want to be a part of this? Everyone's going to want to hit this on the ground running.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why it's so interesting as sort of a petri dish that we're running this experiment in. How are all these models going to work? Unfortunately, for the people that are going to be living in there and the people that are visiting there, they're going to be the guinea pigs. Is it working? Is it not working? If it does, it's called greenhousing. You work out it works somewhere, and it works really well, and then you spread it out. Right?
Yeah.
It's going to be the greenhouse, and then all those people are just going to be experimented on. It's like Facebook back in the day, like playing with people's emotions and all sorts of data targeting, whatever. It's going to be exactly the same sort of calamity if they're not very, very careful.
So earlier this year, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association filed a lawsuit that sought to abolish the partnership agreement between Sidewalk Labs and Waterfront Toronto. So are we going to see these plans go ahead?
I think that it's inevitable. I mean, Dr. Off was saying, you know, they're going to break ground in late 2020, and it's going to be built between 2023 and 2024.
All right.
I think it will go ahead. They just need to get it worked out, what's going to work. And this is where it gets really screwy. When you put in one piece of technology into a city context, you know, Wi-Fi, or say, you know, Wi-Fi with some cloud services, you've got terms and conditions of using the Wi-Fi. You've got terms and conditions of your internet service provider. You've got terms and conditions of that platform. If that platform uses 1,000 different software libraries from different vendors and advertisers and whatever, you've then got 1,000 terms and conditions that they've actually managed that you don't actually touch. We've got so many layers of complexity in these systems that we're not going to truly know if there's an agreement between someone like Sidewalk Labs and the City of Toronto, and they say, yes, you own the data, in the back end of that might actually be contradicted by the other service agreements that actually exist.
Boy.
And that's when it gets really complicated.
Yeah.
That's why privacy related to terms and conditions and personal data is a really tough thing today, because we live in a world with complicated systems and complex systems, and no one can really work out who's responsible for what. And you know, when it comes down to court cases, everyone's pointing the finger at each other.
Yeah. Well, so in terms of smart cities, do you anticipate Canada is going to be ahead of the curve?
Well, something like this certainly helps them get ahead of the curve. But here's the situation. There's about 1,000 smart cities in the world being developed right now. You know, everything from small pilots to larger rollouts like Songdo Business District in South Korea. 500 of those 1,000 pilot projects are in China.
Oh, boy. All right, they win.
China's going to win.
Yeah.
Well, China's going to win within their own Chinese territory.
But China, like, what's their motivation? Is it to be innovative, to develop, or is it to parent? Is it to monitor? Is it to keep everybody in line?
How do you best service billions of people? You make your system as efficient as possible. You unite them under a singular sort of platform.
Is that their motivation, though?
Yeah, absolutely.
To service?
Yeah. But ultimately, off the back
or to monitor.
It is to monitor. Ultimately, you got to remember places like China actually employ grandmothers to sit on the corner of the streets as extensions of the police to basically to scold and report in people that they see doing wrong things.
Wow, that's genius.
So it kind of is, but it goes beyond technology at that state. So you know, the smart city is actually a true smart city for me is a city that makes people like you and me smarter. It isn't just smart because it's got tech.
Yeah.
That's the secret of building out what a true smart city should be.
Well, I'll tell you, in terms of surveillance, smart cities, surveillance, they got nothing on my mom. So I think that's the way to go.
Yeah.
Might these plans, all of these plans in terms of Canadian and smart cities, might they change, and this is a political question, but might they change should the leadership change at the federal level? I mean, do you see that Trudeau and the Liberal government is more motivated to advance in tech versus other parties in this country? I
think Trudeau and his team have been very sort of progressive around, you know, tech funding and the such like. Who's to say, you know, what happens in the next election? There's some pretty backward people around, and there's some very progressive people around. So
different visions.
Different visions. And what happens in politics? You want to kill the other person's vision because people voted for change.
That's right.
Every time you change a government, everything, you know, you waste tons of money and you spend tons of money.
Yeah.
And suddenly you force some countries into the dark ages on certain policies, not naming any countries that might be south of Canada. and some are huge revolutions, you know, driving things forward.
Yeah. Well, check out NikolasBadminton.com, futurist researcher, keynote speaker, Nikolas Badminton. Nick, I can't thank you enough for joining us. Our conversations are always I always look forward to them, and they never disappoint. I really appreciate this. Thanks a lot, man.
So much fun. Thank you.
All right. Maybe we'll talk again next week or the
We
week
sure-
after, or
we
whenever
sure
we can.
will, yeah.
You got a lot of NikolasBadminton.com. We always find something.
We will.
All right. Thank you, sir.